Before to dig into the details about how lab services works, let's define a statement about the service. So, what is this lab services is about? Okay, so what is the lab services? So it is a service in Azure, a platform as a service resource in Azure, whereby institutions can, easily leverage labs for their students and giving at the same time flexibility for the professors and tutors to create and manage the content that the lab is going to be providing to the students. And in the other hand, abstracting the whole complexity of having a robust and efficient lab uh, from the IT side. So instead of having dozens of servers running complex software and specific configurations for that. So you can just go to Azure Portal or even using CLI or PowerShell. You spin up a lab account, and into that lab account, you can put whatever kind of lab you wanna go forward. So this is all about lab services. This is about extracting the complexity of having robust labs for your students and not necessarily having these students on site. So now that we understand what lab services is and the benefits of having a service like that up and running inside the educational institution, so I think we can go a little bit deeper and understand the specifics about the service. And all starts understanding personas. So lab services approaches three different kinds of users within a lab account. So you can have an IT administrator, which is the person or group of person in charge of creating the lab account, setting up the images that the professors or the tutors they are going to be using later on by creating their labs. So this is going to be a responsibility of the IT managers as well to define who is going to be able to access that lab, and in each kind of uh, permissioning aspect the users will be able to access that particular lab or group of labs. So the IT administrator is the guy who is going to access the Azure portal or CLI or PowerShell to spin up the whole thing, the configuration, and make that configuration, the lab itself, available to the tutors later on. Then we have the second persona, and this persona is going to be the professor, the teacher, or the tutor, right? So it depends, you name it. But this persona here will be in charge of creating the lab, adding content to that lab, and making that lab available to the students. Okay, so the tutor is going to be defining the whole configuration about the virtual machine that they need to be in place, like dependencies, packages, the whole thing that needs to be tied to that particular virtual machine that is going to be make available to the students later on. So the tutor, the professor, will be the persona in charge of that particular aspect, setting up the lab itself. And then we have the student part of the story, right? So then we have the students being invited by the tutors, the professors, to come in and enjoy the labs and the content and the whole configuration that was made towards to provide the resources they need to learn that particular content. So let's say that we have a teacher creating a lab for database. So we have the whole thing already set up and configured for the students just come in and having an entire environment available for them to do their stuff and practicing the concepts that the teacher, the professor, is trying to pass along. When it comes to lab services, there are two different moments, and it relates to the three different personas that we just saw. Okay, so the first moment is when the IT management team comes to the scene and create the lab account and do the configuration on your behalf, on behalf of the tutors, professors, and such, and make everything available for them to start the work. Okay, so the IT management team will be in charge to create the lab account, to define the custom image for that labs, make the images available for the teachers and the professors. They will be in charge to assign the specific professors or tutors to particular each kind of lab accounts available already created, and integrate the eventually integrating existing labs with existing VNets inside the institution. So the IT management team is the first team to come to the scene and put everything in place. Then we have a second moment, and this is when the tutors, the professors, they come in and they start doing their job, creating the lab, putting the content in place, and inviting users, creating scheduling to come in. So this is where the lab itself is going to be generated in terms of content and configurations for that lab. And then it comes to the third moment where the students will be invited to join and to start doing their stuff on top of that lab just created by the tutors or professors and etc. Okay, so by having the clear understanding about these three concepts, the personas, how are these different moments of creating and having a lab up and running within the institution, so we can go to the protocol time and see how these concepts land together into the lab services in Azure. So let's do it. So I'm here in my Azure subscription already set up with a research group, and I'm now wearing the hat of the IT administrator. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create a lab account, which is the virtual container that contains the whole thing tied to my labs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add a new resource into this particular resource group. And then I'm going to type here lab services. I should be able to see it. I'm gonna go ahead and click and create, and then I'm gonna fulfill this quick form. So I need to provide a name for that lab account, so I'm gonna call it databases, for example. This is my subscription, American University. This is my research group already defined. I'm gonna select East US as a primarily region. I'm not creating any shared image gallery, which is a virtual container that allows me to share images, VHGs, to different labs all over different subscriptions. I could have it here, but this is not the case for my demonstration here. So I'm not touching this at this point. I'm not integrating any VNet with my particular lab for databases. So I think I'm good to go. And I'm going to go ahead and click on create. Okay, that's great. So I have here my lab account, my new lab account that I just created, and I'm gonna go explore that a little bit. So I could, for example, select the images that I would like to make available to my professors, my teachers, and etc. I have some already enabled. I'm gonna keep that enabled, and I'm not touching that for this particular demonstration, but I have dozens of images available here. I could select the ones I would like to make available to my teachers and etc., but I'm not touching that once again. I can have a view about my labs already created for that particular lab account. There's no lab at all. And what I'm gonna do now is to add my professors that will be in charge to create the lab itself. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create an add lab creators here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add a new role assignment. And when I click on that particular link, I have the possibility to select which kind of role that particular professor or tutor they are gonna play with my lab. So I'm gonna select lab creator, which is gonna allow that particular professor or group of professors to do stuff on top of their own lab inside my lab account. So I'm gonna pick up the lab creator here, and I already have a teacher that was assigned by the coordinator of that particular course to drive these database labs in my computer science department, which is gonna be Laura. So I'm gonna look for her. There you go. I'm gonna select her and I'm gonna save. And once I do that, Laura is going to be automatically able to access that lab and start doing their own stuff and creating a particular content and configuration to make available to their students later on. Okay, so now I'm Laura Duhan, a professor of computer science department, which was assigned to deliver, to drive the databases labs within department. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna access the Azure portal for the labs. So we do have this particular address over here, which is labs.azure.com. Just type it in your preferred browser. And by doing this, you're gonna be able to see the screen like this. And then I'm gonna go ahead and click and sign in, because I'm already a registered user within Azure AD for America's University. This is the institution I belongs to. So I'm gonna log in. So I'm gonna put my information here, which is Laura.Dunham at America's University Microsoft.com. Next, then my password, and then sign in. So what Azure Lab is going to do now is he's going to verify that I have that particular credentials. If you remember, the IT guys, they settled me as a lab creator. So right now Azure Labs is making sure that I have those kinds of permissions. So I do, because I'm seeing the screen here. And from now on, I will be able to create a new lab. So I'm gonna go ahead and create, let's say that I'm gonna teach SQL Server for my students, for example. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new lab. I could just follow up this window here, but I could simply come up here and click on new lab and then name my lab like, SQL Server 101, for example. I can have 4 students, for example. I'm going to go ahead and click save. So the number of students is going to be the number of virtual machines spin it up within my SQL Server 101 lab. Okay, so I'm gonna have 4 students and 4 virtual machines. I could have 10, 20, 30. It's up to you. It depends on how many students are you going to provide that content to. In my case, I have 4. But you could go ahead and select the number you would like. Here I have 5 different sizes of virtual machines for that lab. So we have a description here, which kind of scenario is recommended based upon the number of vCores and memory available for each VM. We have 5 small, which costs 20 cents of dollars per hour of the virtual machine executing. So this is very indicated for small scenarios. For example, if you'd like to teach Linux or even small softwares like Python or something like that, this would be ideal. Then we have medium, which has 4 vCores and 7 gigabytes for as RAM for that particular machine. Recommended for relational databases, in-memory cache, and etc. So I'm gonna pick up this one for this particular lab. But then we have a medium size which supports nested virtualization. So if you have a scenario where you need to put a Hyper-V in place, for example, or even a VMware in place to teach our students about virtualization, etc. You could pick up a virtual machine like this, or even large. Both of them are supporting nested virtualization. And then if you have a scenario where you need to work with AutoCAD or inventory, something like, that particular kind of software, which requires a lot of visual processing, image processing. So GPU would be recommended for you, and you have an option available here with 12 cores and 112 giga available for RAM for this particular virtual machine. So for this particular lab, I'm gonna pick up medium, which is perfect for our scenario. I'm gonna keep up Windows 10 Pro as my image base, and on top of this particular image, I'm gonna go ahead and create my entire configuration for my lab. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on next here. Now I'm gonna set up the user and password for that particular virtual machines within my lab. So I'm gonna put here student, for example, and I'm gonna set up in a password for this user. Let me do that again, make sure that I'm not doing anything wrong here. Create, and then my lab is going to be set up. So what lab service is going to do behind the scenes, it is going to set up a template virtual machine for me as a instructor or tutor or a professor, where I can come up with my entire content configurations, put everything in place on top of that particular template VM, and once I have my work done, I can go ahead and publish that VM and make that VM available for my entire set of students. In this particular case, 4, but it would be whatever number you have selected in the earlier step. And then that particular lab will be available for the students. While Laura is deploying, I just took a look in another teacher who has some labs assigned to him as well, which is Dave Sheets. And Dave Sheets is a developer, and he was assigned to drive the labs about development scenarios for students within Americans University. And he has 2 labs already settled, C++ 101 and Python 101. I'm going to take a look at this one here, Python 101, because this is a Linux environment. And this is very interesting for us to touch with our customers about possibilities not only for Windows, but Linux as well. So I'm going to take a look in this particular lab, Python 101. And once I go into it, I'm going to see a couple of very interesting options, right? So here I have a dashboard for the teacher, for the instructor, the professor. Okay, so I have a couple of possibilities here. First, I have the possibility to see how many virtual machines I have already assigned and how many users are already registered for being using that virtual machines that I have already settled in my environment. For this particular lab, I have 5 virtual machines available, but I only have 4 students assigned. Okay, which means that part of my students, were already settled to start using my virtual machines, but I have one that, he or she didn't. So they need to go after it in order to get themselves registered and afterwards start using the content on top of the virtual machines. So I have the information that Camila Rodriguez has already used it for 7.1 hours, that particular virtual machine. So Azure is going to be charging Americans University 7.1 hours for this particular virtual machine, which is, still low. But I have some control on top of the number of users hours for each one of these virtual machines. But from here, I could start a virtual machine, I could delete a virtual machine, I could do whatever I want here, okay? I just have the view about the virtual machines, who is assigned it to, who had already got registered, and what is the status of this particular virtual machines at this particular point in time. all of those are stopped. Okay. So another very interesting possibility I have here as an instructor is to set up a schedule. So I could say, for example, that a particular virtual machine or the virtual machines underneath that particular lab will be available to my students every Wednesday from 8 to 10 a.m., for example, in a weekly basis. So I could come up here and add a new schedule, and I could select Wednesday starting from 17 June and going to all the way through 17 of October. And it would be available from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Respecting my Eastern time zone, for example, right? I could have it twice a week, or I could have only once a week, or I could have that only once. That would be a single shot lab for my students, for example. I have some possibilities here. And the cool thing about it is that once I define the scheduling and I tell the lab that the scheduling is going to be the constraint for my users to use the virtual machines underneath that particular lab services is going to use this particular scheduling as the major aspect to input some constraints of my usage. So that way I would be more cost effective and getting some kind of control about the number of usage of hours from each one of those virtual machines for my students. Okay, I could have that unlimited. I have this right now this way over here, but I could put some time of constraints. The scheduling time is one of the constraints that I could apply, or I could go manually to the users tab over here, and I could set some kind of manual number of hours available for a given student into my lab. In this case, I could put, for example, the users, they are going to have 2 hours to use a particular virtual machine underneath my lab, and doesn't matter if he's going to take 10 minutes today, 20 minutes tomorrow, and the rest of the minutes he has available all over the month. I don't care. Okay, so he's going to have 2 hours, and he has 2 hours to accomplish the whole set of activities he needs to put on top of that particular virtual machine underneath my lab. Okay, I could do if I would like as well. And from here, I have a vision about the users that already got registering to my lab. So I have, for example, Camila Rodriguez. She's already registered into my lab. And what I'm gonna do now is take a look on the student's view. So then I can have a holistic view about the whole process for my lab services. But as an instructor, I have the possibility to generate some kind of scheduling. I have the possibility to create my virtual machines and put my entire content on top of it and make that available to my students, as Dave Sheets has already made with this particular VM called Python 101, which is targeting to teach students to learn Python programming language. And I have the possibilities to invite my students in so many different ways. In this particular way, Dave Sheets, he has gotten a registration link, which is this one over here. He just copied this thing and he put everything together, student's password and the registration link, into a personalized email, and he sent that over to the students. And from there, students like Camila Rodriguez, they were able, by using this particular registration link, they were able to get themselves registered. Okay, now I'm Camila Rodriguez. I've got already logged into my lab services web portal. And as you can see, as a student, I have a let's say more straightforward view about the lab. So Camila is already signed for one lab, which is Python 101. She has already started the virtual machine. So the hours about that VM is already counting. So the institution is always important to mention that the institution is being charged because the virtual machine is up and running. Okay, so what Camila is going to do now is she's going to complete the activities that she needs to do into that particular lab. So she's going to be clicking here on that button called connect, and then she's gonna be putting her password, which is the password that was settled for that particular virtual machine. So because Camila is away from this particular lab for a while, for a security reason, Lab Services is requiring that she reset her password. So she just did it right here, right now, and I'm seeing the message that the password is being resetted. So in a few minutes, I'll be able to connect into this virtual machine using SSH, because this is a Linux environment, and using this updated password that I just settled. Okay, so the password was updated, and I'm seeing here a message that this particular lab has no limited time of usage, or some constraint regarding the time. So I'm gonna go ahead and click and connect, because I'm already done to start using my VM once again. And then, because this is a Linux environment, I'm seeing a SSH command line, which enables me to connect into my Linux VM, which has my entire environment up and running. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on cop command here, and I'm gonna use my Linux subsystem here on my Windows virtual machine. Then I'm gonna paste that command line that I just got. Enter. Okay, so my terminal is communicating with my virtual machine within my lab. I'm gonna put the password that I just updated. There we go. I'm inside of my VM in Azure within my Python 101 lab into my Azure Lab Services account. Okay, so this is the entire process. I hope that you can take advantage of these demonstrations, concepts that we just discussed, to bring the conversations and to leverage those conversations around lab services with our customers, and enjoy.